My purpose this morning is to show you how the wisdom of Proverbs, which is the wisdom of the Christian faith, how the wisdom of Proverbs guides us in this area of friendship. And we'll take the rest of the time to do this. But before we jump right in, I want to orient our minds about the topic of friendship. I think we'd all agree that there is a difference between friendship and mere acquaintances, mere companionship, and that a true, deep friendship is like a rare jewel among pebbles. Christian author C.S. Lewis writes that the typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." You know, God made us to be social creatures. We don't like to feel like we're the only one. We want to know that there is someone else who understands and can identify with us. That is friendship. That's the basic meaning of friendship. It's looking at someone else and finding in them another self that resonates with you. But it seems that in our culture, and I think maybe even in our personality, there's some forces, in our various personalities, there's some forces that conflict with us having good friendships. And I'll name 3 of these to get us thinking about why we have a hard time with friendship. So there's some forces in our culture and our personalities that conflict with our ability to have good friendships. We have individualism and ignorance and injury. So we'll just look at these briefly as forces that conflict with friendship. First of all, individualism. So individualism is a distinct flavor or a distinct characteristic of American culture, and I think especially New England culture. Individualism likes to thrive all by myself. Individualism is that impulse that tends to idolize the self-made man or the self-made woman. It tends to focus on networking over friendships or contacts over deep relationships. Individualism reminds me of a book that was written by children's author Mercer Meyer, who writes these stories about these little critters that are learning life lessons like getting along with your brothers and sisters and cleaning up your room. These little cute, furry, messy little creatures. And there is this book that Mercer Meyer wrote called All by Myself. And little critter can get out of bed all by myself. Button my overalls all by myself. Brush my fur all by myself. Put on my socks all by myself. And while that is a wonderful, wonderful quality when you're learning how to function and grow up, individualism doesn't move past this all by myself. For all its marvelous strengths, individualism is fixated on doing things all by myself. And when it comes to friendship, individualism says, I can manage all by myself. I can manage without friends. But friendships, deep, meaningful, lasting friendships, rarely flower on the brave but lonely tree of individualism. There's another force at work, I think, that keeps us from having good friendships, and that is of ignorance. If individualism says, I could manage without friends, ignorance says, I don't know how to make friends. I think behind this ignorance is a very modern phenomenon that we see with social media, social networking. So for the first time in history, someone could have 1,000 friends, half of whom would not even recognize you if they saw you in person. And half of those probably don't even like you. This is just a nature of social media that has it's redefined or given a different definition of the word friend and washed it of its true meaning. And we have maybe a lot of friends, but few true friendships. And that could leave us wondering, I don't know how to make friends. Ignorance, but also injury. If individualism says I can manage without friends, and if ignorance says I don't know how to make friends, then injury says I'm better off without friends. And I find this illustrated by this heartbreaking paragraph I came across on the internet when I was doing some research. It was a discussion forum in response to the topic of friendship. And this woman writes on this forum for the public to see Some people just do not want friends because of how they have been treated by these so-called friends. I have had friends and know how to be one, but at the age of 72 have become tired of being taken advantage of, tired of lies, excuses, not helping me when I've helped them. I've lost possessions, I've loaned money that wasn't repaid. I'm not bragging, but I've done a lot for these so-called friends. After my husband died last year, they hung around for a while, but I guess it took a while for my aging brain to realize that these people were not friends. They were users and manipulators, so I've decided it's better not to have friends at this time. Maybe such people have had just enough of all the drama that some friends can bring. You see how these forces at work in our lives can make it difficult for us to have good friendships. But they have something in common, and that is whether it's individualism or whether it's ignorance or whether it's injury, all these forces have self at the center. The central consideration is self. Individualism wants to succeed all by myself. The person who's ignorant of how to make friends sets out with a goal to make friends for myself. The person who's even the person who's been injured with regard to friendship is nursing one's own wounds for oneself. And so when we turn now to the book of Proverbs, we have to begin by recognizing that the wisdom that is being commended here in the book of Proverbs is the wisdom of not a self-centered life, but a God-centered life. So to live a wise life means not to live with self at the center, but to live with God at the center. Not nursing my own wounds or my own hurts about friendship, not living my own individualistic life, and not even seeking out how can I make friends for myself, but what does it mean to live in the fear of God? How can I align my life with God's character and purposes? That's the wise life. And so we can expect when we come to this topic of friendship that friendship is going to have a completely different orientation. It's going to begin not with myself, it's going to begin with God. And therefore, if your starting point is, when it comes to this topic, when you think, oh, yay, he's going to be talking about friendship, and in your mind that meant he's going to talk about how to make friends. No, that's actually not it at all, because even the topic of friendship has to be aligned with the character and purposes of God. And so there are three parts of this message on friendship, and I'll give them to you, and then we'll walk through them. The first part is a wise person knows how to choose friends. A wise person has Jesus as his or her friend. And third, a wise person knows how to be a friend. Okay, so we're going to walk through those, and if you didn't write all that down, you'll get it in a moment. The first point is that a wise person knows how to choose friends. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." What I found surprising as I was researching for the sermon, this is my practice as I prepared for these topical sermons on the book of Proverbs. I just open my Bible to the book of Proverbs and start reading the whole thing through and marking all the verses that pertain to that particular topic. And as I began marking the verses that had to do with friendship, the thing that surprised me was that there was far more having to do with what the wise person, the kinds of friends the wise person avoids than the kind of person the wise person is friends with. So Proverbs talks more about who not to be friends with than who to be friends with. A wise person knows how to choose friends. And this makes sense when you think about it. So the wise person, that is a person who aligns his or her life, with the purposes of God, is going to encounter other people in the journey of life whose lives are not aligned with God's purposes. So if you're trying to live a wise life, you're trying to live a God-centered life, you're going to encounter people whose life is off-centered. Like a wheel with an axle off to the side, it's going to self-destruct. And so the wisdom of Proverbs talks about the kind of friendships that we should not have. A wise person knows how to choose friends, and that means that a wise person rejects certain kinds of friendships. And I'm going to list four of them, explain four kinds of friendships that a wise person knows how to avoid. A wise person avoids the greedy, the seductive, the angry, and the flatterer. All right, I'll walk through these. Okay, so the wise person, and these all have something in common. These all have a vision for an attractive, flourishing life that is off-centered with God and his purposes. So the wise person avoids friendship with the greedy. And we see this back in Proverbs 1. So right off the bat, when you look at Proverbs and you're thinking about, okay, what does this teach us about friends? Right in the very first chapter, it's a father speaking to his son, and he gives his son some instruction about who not to hang out with. There's a gang that the father says, my son, don't be part of that gang. What's this gang all about? Well, look at verse 10 of Proverbs 1. The father says, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. What are these sinners saying? They're saying, come with us. Let's lie in wait for blood. Let's ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole like those who go out of the pit. What are they trying to accomplish here? Here's what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to get money from people. What motivates the gang is easy money and also the attractiveness of being part of something. So join this gang, pool your money, put your resources together, and we're going to have a blast. We're going to take advantage of people, and we're going to get rich. And the father is saying, if a wise son is not going to have anything to do with that, because that vision of friendship is aligned around wealth improperly gained. It offers an attractive picture of flourishing that will, in the end, lead to self-destruction. How do we know that? Why? Because in verse 18, the father says to his son, these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. A vision of friendship, a partnership, companionship, the gang that is attractive because of its offer of easy money is self-destructive. It's not God-centered, and a wise person avoids that. Now, not only does a wise person avoid the greedy that's motivated by illegitimate gaining of wealth, but also the seductive. So you don't need to turn there just for the sake of time, but in chapter 5, verse 8, the father is speaking to the son about the seductress and says, keep your way far from her. Do not go near to the door of her house. In Proverbs 7, verse 13, it says that when the father is giving this story about a young man he sees walking to the street right by the house of this immoral woman, the seductress, he says, she seizes him and says, come, let us take our fill of love till morning. If the gang was trying to compel the gullible young man with a promise of easy money, the seductress tries to compel him with a promise of easy sex. There's something attractive there, but it is off-center. It's not part of a God-centered life, so a wise person knows to avoid those kinds of relationships. The greedy, the seductress, the angry. Again, you don't need to turn there, but just listen to this. This is Proverbs 22, verse 4. It says, make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. So the wise person knows to avoid a person who is an angry man. But here's what's attractive about that vision of friendship, is that it is easy to get riled up when you're around someone who's really angry. I mean, they have a genuine concern for justice. There's something that they're legitimately upset about. And they're talking about it, and they're getting angry with it, and they want to pull you into their vindictive mindset. And the Proverbs saying there's a danger here. What is right is a pursuit of justice. Yes, you should long for justice, you should work for justice, but there is a clear line between a pursuit of justice and personal revenge. And that is what the angry man is all about. And a friendship with someone that is centered around personal revenge is self-destructive. Why? This verse goes on and says, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Okay, so a wise person knows how to avoid certain friendships. The gang, greedy for money. The seductress, easy sex. The angry man, for personal revenge. And finally, the flatterer. Now, the flatterer is the person that's going to tell you what you want to hear about yourself. If the gang traffics in a desire for wealth, the seductress a desire for sex, the angry man has a desire for justice, the flatterer traffics in something that we all know we desperately need, and that is self-esteem. We all want to feel good about ourselves. And when someone pays us a compliment, it's so juicy. It's just something that you want to savor. They said something nice about me. They like me. And you memorize that phrase and you remember, and it sticks, and you want to come back for more. And yet what the flatterer does is preying upon your desire for self-esteem, is actually manipulating you for what he or she really wants. That is incredibly dangerous. Someone has said this, I like this definition of flattery, as it contrasts with slander. Slander is when someone says something behind your back they would never say to your face. And flattery is when someone says something to your face they would never say behind your back. That's flattery. It's an attempt to manipulate by preying upon your desire for self-esteem. And what all these have in common, whether it's the greedy gang, the seductress, the angry man, or the flatterer, is that it's off-center. It's not the God-centered life. It's putting something else at the center. And so the wise person who is attempting to live a God-aligned life, who is walking in the fear of the Lord, when he sees a relationship that revolves around any of those things, he knows to avoid them, because it's not compatible with a God-centered life. Now, let me be clear. I just said that a wise person knows how to avoid certain friendships. It doesn't mean that a wise person is unfriendly to those kinds of people. It doesn't mean that a wise person is rude or avoids those kinds of people. It is merely this, that a wise person does not allow himself to be drawn into those godless values. In fact, a wise person is going to be kind and loyal and caring to everyone, no matter what, no matter who they are. We're going to see this in just a minute. But the difference is that he does not allow his life to be aligned with the alluring and attractive vision of a truly good life that these different kinds of people offer. So a wise person avoids these kinds of friendships because they are misaligned. They're not God-centered. And no relationship built on godless values can result in lasting friendship. And here's why. Lasting friendship cannot come out of any of these things. Each one of these offers of friendships have built within them the ingredients for self-destruction. Because wisdom is like glue. It can bind people together, but folly is like acid. It disintegrates. Wisdom provides an opportunity for true friendship, but folly, eventually, the people that are given to folly will be isolated and be incredibly lonely. All of these visions for friendship, they're like a ship with a broken rudder. They promise to take you where you want to go, but instead they maroon you on an island of loneliness. There's no fulfillment and there's no true friendship in these false visions for flourishing. And that's why a wise person who is seeking to have his or her life aligned with God rejects these kinds of friendships. Companion of fools will come to ruin. Now, I'm going to transition to the next point, and that is that a wise person has Jesus as his friend. But before we do, let me point out what you might, if you're thinking really carefully about this. So go back to Proverbs 13, verse 20, where we started. If you're thinking carefully about this, you may detect a small problem here. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Now, what if you find yourself to be a fool, though? What if you discover, after looking at some of these things that you find yourself attracted to, or some behaviors that you've engaged in, what if you realize, well, I am the fool? If that's the case, then no wise person should befriend you. And if that's the case, you only have fools as your companions, and if that's the case, you will suffer harm, as the proverb says. And here's where we must see Proverbs as being a pointer to Jesus, who is the perfect wise person because he was perfectly aligned with God. He never sinned. He always did the will of the Father. And yet Jesus, the wisest man who ever lived, became a friend to fools, a friend of sinners, a friend of people whose lives were deliberately misaligned with the purposes of God. When Jesus came to the earth, He became a friend of sinners. How can that be? Because Jesus was on a mission to change people from being fools to being wise. And here's how he did it. He didn't do it merely by teaching them, although he did teach. And he didn't merely do it by inspiring them, although he set a perfect, inspiring example of what it means to be a true friend. Because the problem with such fools as you and I is deeper than the need for instruction, deeper than the need for inspiration. We need substitution. We need someone who can die in our place. We need, as Jesus was, a wise person who would die the death of a fool so that fools could live the life of the wise. That's what Jesus did. Jesus came to die in the place of foolish sinners like you and me. The wisest person who ever lived befriended sinners. And that's why I say a wise person has Jesus as his friend. And I almost hesitate to put it that way because having Jesus as your friend, it sounds so trite, almost corny. Like it's this idea of friendship with Jesus has been trivialized, I think. But this is incredibly significant that Jesus, as Pastor Ben read in our call to worship, Jesus called his disciples his friends. And that was on the very eve of their forsaking him. Jesus called them his friends on the very eve of his dying for them. And a wise person, a person who recognizes my life is so out of line with God that I need Jesus and trust in Jesus, a wise person has Jesus as his or her friend. And let me explain what that means for our friendships, because it's incredibly important. So the first point was that a wise person knows how to choose friends, but the second point now is that a wise person has Jesus as his friend. Here's what that means for our friendship. There are two massive implications of this. If Jesus is your friend, first of all, Jesus is your truest friend. Jesus is that true friend spoken of in Proverbs 18:24 that says this. Don't turn there, just listen. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And Jesus is that friend. Jesus is your truest friend. Now, it's been said that the difference between a casual friend or an acquaintance or even a good friend and a true friend is something like this. A good friend, if you find yourself in prison, will come and visit you and say, buddy, I'm so sorry you messed up. But a true friend will look at you from his own prison cell and say, buddy, we really messed up. But the best kind of friend will come to you in your prison cell and say, friend, let's trade places. And that's what Jesus did for us. He comes to us in our folly, in our deserved punishment, and says, friend, let's trade places. Jesus is your truest friend because he proved for you, just like we sang, that if we find ourselves lost and foolish, he will come to us because he died on the cross for us. Jesus is your truest friend. Now, here's the second point. I said there's two implications of Jesus being our friend. A wise person had Jesus as his friend. That means Jesus is your truest friend, and also means that Jesus enables you to be a true friend. Jesus being your true friend enables you to be a true friend. And here's what I mean. Until you know that you have a friend that will never leave or forsake you, you will always be grasping in your friends what they can never give you. I'll say that again. And until you believe, or unless you know that you have a friend who loved you so much, he'll never leave or forsake you, you'll always be grasping for something in your friends that they can't give you. And that will crush both you and them. That is looking for something in mere human friendships that mere human friendship cannot give. You see, you will feel desperate for the approval of your friends. until you are assured that you have a friend that loves you no matter what. And you'll be willing to go to any lengths to please your friends until you realize that you have a friend that is pleased with you no matter what. And you'll be devastated, not just disappointed, but absolutely devastated when your friends fail you if you are looking for in them someone who will never fail you, something that you can only find in Jesus. You see what I mean by this? Unless and until you know that you have in Jesus a friend that will never forsake you, who loves you so much, you'll always be grasping for something in your friends that they can never give you. And that is destructive to friendship. It's a fatal flaw. It would turn you into a kind of friendship vampire. The problem with vampires is not that they don't like people. It's they like people too much. And their liking of people sucks the very life out of them. And we can be that way with friends. Unless we are assured that no matter what my friends do, and no matter where I am, whether or not they fail me, I am not going to give up, have the injured mindset and say, that's it, I'm done with friendship. Why? Because I have a friend that will never leave or forsake me, and he proved that on the cross. That's what it means to have a friend in Jesus. Jesus, friend of sinners. Jesus befriended me when I was a sinner. Jesus befriended me when I was wandering in my folly. And so I can not give up on people who fail me. The wise life is a life of friendship. And a person who knows that Jesus loves them is free to befriend. Now, let's talk about that third point. A wise person knows how to be a friend. So we said that wisdom teaches us how to live a life of friendship. The wise life is a life of friendship. And the first point is that a wise person knows how to choose friends and avoid certain kinds of friendships that are misaligned with God's purposes. A wise person has Jesus as his or her friend. And third, a wise person knows how to be a friend. And if we're still asking the question, how can I have friends? How can I have friends? We're starting off on the wrong foot, because wisdom teaches us not how can I have friends, but how can I be a friend? The wise person is less concerned about finding friends and more concerned about being a friend. And that leads us to observe 3 marks of a wise friend that we find throughout Proverbs. And there may be different ways of categorizing these. There may be some other characteristics, maybe subcategorized below some of these. But here are 3 marks, 3 characteristics of a wise friend. A wise friend is honest, caring, and loyal. And I'll walk through these as well. A wise friend is honest, caring, and loyal. Honest. A wise person tells the truth, even when it's really hard to tell the truth. And we see this most distinctly in Proverbs, as a truth-telling friend is contrasted with the flatterer. We talked about the flatterer a little earlier. The flatterer likes to buy people's friendship or manipulate them by trafficking in their desire for self-esteem. And the flatterer is willing to tell a person what they want to hear. But a true friend tells someone what they need to hear. I've experienced this. There was a time when I was in college, and I was with a group of friends, and we were hanging out and getting carried away, and I must have just let my mouth run and said a couple things that weren't true. I said it for self-serving purposes, obviously, but later on, one of the guys who was in that group, he pulled me aside. He said, "Jonathan, you didn't tell the truth, did you?" I was like, "No." You know, my response to that friend was not, "Oh, man, I'm not hanging out with that guy again." But it was this: of all the guys in that group, there was one who proved that he was my friend. Why? Because he told me what I needed to hear, whether or not I liked it. That was hard for him to say, and it was hard for me to hear. And yet it proved to me that he cared more about me than he cared about what I thought of him. Now, a person who is willing to go along with his friends, no matter what they do, is called a follower. A person who is willing to tell people what they want to hear, no matter what's true, is called a flatterer. But a person who tells people what they need to hear is called a friend. And that's the kind of friend that we need to be. A wise friend is honest. Now, such honesty might be hard, but it is never harsh. And here's why. Because a friend, a wise friend, is not only honest, but also caring. A wise friend is caring. A wise person cares about others. That means that when a wise person speaks the truth, they speak the truth in love. A wise person cares about others. Caring about others makes a wise person a careful listener. And to explain this, I want you to turn to Proverbs 20, verse 5. Again, we're looking at characteristics of a wise friend. A wise friend is honest. A wise friend is caring. And this is seen in the way that a wise friend listens to others and helps others in his listening. The purpose, Proverbs 25, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Have you ever felt like your mind is buried in deep water? You don't even know what you're thinking. You feel a little perplexed and disoriented in life, and you think this, I just need to talk to my friend. And they talk to your friend, and your friend just listens. And you go away from that conversation thinking it was a conversation, but really you had just talked, and your friend had said very little, and you discovered why you were thinking what you were thinking and why you were feeling what you were feeling. Why? Because you had a wise, caring friend who's willing to listen. A wise friend is a careful listener. A wise friend is also a careful communicator. Here in Proverbs 20, turn to chapter 25. A wise friend is a careful communicator. What about when your friend is hurting? A true friend knows what it's like to hurt and can empathize with someone in their pain. Proverbs 25:20 says, "Whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day." On a cold day, you need layers to keep you warm and comfortable. But when someone takes your coat off, it doesn't make you feel comfortable. It makes you feel colder. And when you are in sorrow and when you have a heavy heart, what you need is not someone to sing you a pep song. You need a friend who can weep with you. That's why this proverb says that whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day. A wise friend is a careful communicator, knows how to communicate and empathize with someone who is struggling. Not only a careful communicator when people are, not only is a wise friend a careful communicator when people are sorrowing, but also when someone does wrong. When your friend wrongs you, what do? Our tendency is to tell everybody about it. But Proverbs 17:9, you don't need to turn there, but I'll just read it to you. Proverbs 17:9 says this, "Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends." A wise friend, when hurt, when offended in some way, is going to respond. Their tendency will be to respond by covering in love. That's okay. You're my friend. He cares. A wise friend is caring. A wise friend and a caring friend. A wise friend is a caring friend. That also makes him a careful companion. I'll read a verse to you on this. This is Proverbs 25:17. It says, "Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you." A friend has the ability, as a caring friend, to put himself in someone else's shoes and to know what the other person needs so that he makes sure that he isn't invading the other person's need for privacy and distance. Instead, he's caring. He's a caring friend. A wise friend is caring. But third, a wise friend is loyal. A wise friend is loyal. Proverbs 17:17, and I'll ask you to turn there because this will be the last verse that we'll look at, and it's a good one to close with, to have our eyes on. Proverbs 17:17 says this, "A friend loves at all times." A friend loves at all times. not just when he feels like it, not when she's just in a good mood, not just when her friends are doing well or can help her, not just when his friends can come alongside him, but even when his friends are struggling. A friend loves at all times. A true friend, a wise friend, is a loyal friend. And that's the kind of friend we can be because Jesus is the ultimate loyal friend who has said, I will never leave or forsake you. Jesus is the ultimate caring friend who is concerned about our needs no matter what, who cared enough for us to die for us, and he's the honest friend who's willing to tell us and reveal to us the true nature, the true condition of our nature. And because we have such a friend in Jesus, such a friend who was a friend of sinners, we can befriend others. We can have the freedom to befriend others. That's the kind of friend that we want to be. As the people of God, especially as those who are part of the local church, those who have bound ourselves in community to each other, we have our lives, by the grace of God, aligned with God's character and purposes through Jesus Christ. So we of all people should seek to be caring and loyal and honest friends with each other. I think sometimes a reason why we struggle with friendships is because we've started out on the wrong foot. We're trying to figure out how can I make friends. But a wise person, once you open yourselves up to the wisdom of God, discovers friends in people that you would not have even imagined. People that maybe in our own bias and our own narrow sectarianism would say, oh, I can't be a friend with him or her because they're in such a different class, or they look so different from me, or they kind of irritate me, or they intimidate me. Oh, but the wisdom of God says, no. Instead of asking who can be my friend, you should ask, who can I be a friend to? That's what the wisdom of God teaches us. And it teaches us that because Jesus is a friend of sinners. A friend who never leaves or forsakes. The friend that sticks closer than a brother. The friend who loves at all times. And by the grace of God, you can be that kind of friend. Let's bow our heads. I want us to have this moment of quiet to reflect on what we have considered here. And I admit, I've given you a lot to think about. But maybe there's one thing, maybe there's just one point of friendship that you have realized, man, I need to grow in this area. Maybe it is. As you just think about this on your own in the quietness of this moment, maybe you realized, I don't think I've ever actually trusted in Jesus as my Savior. This whole topic of friendship has made me realize that my grasping at things in my friends that they cannot give reveals that I've never found Jesus to be my true friend. I've never given up on my white-knuckled grip on my own ways and seen in Jesus my only hope of salvation. Maybe you've never trusted. My friend, it doesn't matter how long you've thought you've been a Christian or how long other people have assumed that you're a good person. If you've not put your trust in Jesus Christ, nothing else matters, not your reputation, not what people think of you. And let me urge you, if that's you, put your trust in Jesus Christ as your Savior. Call upon Him as your Lord, and He will save you. And if you are here considering this and you realize, yeah, you'd say, I do believe that. I do believe that, but this whole topic of friendship has revealed in my life some massive areas of need and weakness that I do expect more from my friends than they can truly give me because I'm not expecting from Jesus what He does give me. Well, then believe in Him more deeply. Maybe there's a friend you have that you need to call up. Maybe there's a word of truth that you need to speak to somebody. Maybe there's a word of caring or an act of caring that you need to share with someone. Maybe there's someone you haven't been loyal to, but you can call up even this afternoon or speak to in some way, because your friendship can flow from the friend that Jesus is to you. Our Father, thank you that while we were foolish and straying sinners, Christ died for us. and not died merely to make us his servants, although we gladly serve him, yet he died to make us his friends. Not ashamed to call us his brothers. Father, what a staggering thought. We've not even begun to dip our toes into the ocean of that thought. Lord, may we wade in and swim and realize that we are surrounded by endless love that frees us to show love to others. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. My friends, thank you for your good attention. Hope that this will provide you for more to think about and talk about and apply. The Word of God does not return empty. Let me just remind you about this, our being in phase 1. We hope to move quickly on from this phase so that we can all gather at the same time. We're, as a pastoral team and the other leaders in the church, are being attentive to what we're hearing, and we will be in communication with you about that as soon as we know. But until then, hope you have a wonderful Lord's Day afternoon. To those of you fathers, happy Father's Day.